Welcome to this webinar today. My name is Bill Baker, and we're delighted to have you joining us today. This is the Virginia Association of Independent Schools sponsored webinars. Today, we're looking at 2016 in review. We'd also like you to have our friend and follow us on Twitter. On Facebook, we're known as Firestorm Solutions. On Twitter, you can follow us at Firestorm Soul. The hashtag for this session is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We do want to remind you, the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and this work product should be read in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. Do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. We do have moderators. Ryan is not with us, but Ken Mercer is with us. Cam Phelan is not able to join us today, so we'll let Ken Mercer say some nice things about the association. Ken, over to you, please.
Good morning. This is Ken Mercer. We very much appreciate the sponsorship of the Virginia Association of Independent Schools. They're doing good work in the state of Virginia, and we are very appreciative of their sponsorship. I will be the I see a little mark going on the screen. Wonderful. I will be the one that contacts all the attendees post webinar over the next couple of days to hear your thoughts. We want to make sure this is of value to you, and would love to hear your feedback about this content and any of the content that you'd like to hear. So that's all I've got. And again, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks to the Virginia Association for their wonderful sponsorship of this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Our presenter today is Firestorm's very own Karen Masulo. Karen is the Chief Intelligence Officer and Executive Vice President of Firestorm. She has extensive experience in social media, training, and all of those other wonderful things. And she's very much on top of what has happened in 2016. So, Karen, over to you, please.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Ken, who was pretending to be Ryan, or Ryan who was pretending to be Ken. I apologize for that. When I created the PowerPoint, I did not change your name, so that's my bad. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today. Jim Satterfield was going to do this presentation, and because we are in a crisis management operation, Jim is handling a crisis. So he asked me if I would step in and talk to you a little bit about the wrap-up of 2016 and a very high-level overview of what we've seen and our perspective on it. And then I encourage you to join us in January of 2017, which just, it's amazing to me that we're already at 2017. Jim will be taking a deeper look back at very specific instances that we're just going to touch on lightly today. He's going to look at those in much more depth next year as we see what the impact has been. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Remember, you can always ask a question by using the GoToWebinar console chat area on, I believe it should be on the right-hand side of your screen. You can type a message in there, and Bill will let me know if we have time to cover those questions. We certainly will. If not, I will email you personally in response. You can also email us at webinars@firestorm.com, and Bill or I, Bill Baker, our moderator, thank you to Bill, Bill Baker or I will respond to you as quickly as possible. As always, there will be a brief of this session posted to our website at firestorm.com. Usually that takes about 48 hours to transcribe and post. And within a couple of hours, a recording of this session will be on our YouTube channel. So that pretty much wraps up administrative and housekeeping duties. So let's talk a little bit about starting the year for 2016, as we will in 2017, and that is going to be planning for the unplanned. This year, we saw some very disturbing events occur, as we do every year. Historically, the reason we do what we do is because we know there will be surprises throughout the year. We saw a terrorist attack during a race, the Jersey Shore race in Chelsea. We saw attacks worldwide using alternate types of weapons, vehicles, instead of traditional guns, or a combination of weapons. We saw a continued attack from a cyber perspective. We saw continued issues around cybersecurity and intelligence, and then natural disasters. We continue to see typhoons, hurricanes, etc. I myself, Bill Baker, and I were talking before this session, and I was mentioning to Bill that where I live in South Carolina, we were having a thunderstorm right now. And we were discussing that we actually haven't had any rain since Hurricane Matthew. And Hurricane Matthew was a pretty big event for those of us on the East Coast. And flooding north of us in South Carolina in your neck of the woods was particularly challenging. So we know that we have a combination of unplanned events that are going to happen every year. Generally, they are of a high level that we know they're going to happen. We just don't know what they're going to look like. So the best advice we can give to you going into 2017 and as we review 2016 is to start with a strong foundation. I'm sure many of you recognize what this specific foundation is, and it is indeed the New World Trade Center complex. So let's talk about planning for the unplanned. In most organizations, we know that crisis impacts are going to come from something that happens in facilities, within your workforce, information security and technology, which is the #1 growing concern, or you're going to have brand and reputation sort of disaster and crisis events. Now, whether your organization is a business or an educational facility, a school, a campus, or a combination of both, because we need to make money in order to educate, we know that this is in general where we're going to see crises arise from. And in a crisis, the initial actions you take and the words that are said are going to greatly influence the impact on your organization. Remember, regardless of whether an event was planned for or it's an unplanned event, most of your crisis decisions are going to follow a common approach. And this is the important piece of this. You have a lot of what we call unauthorized coaches in the background. In a crisis, we want you to understand that Firestorm is your coach. We should be your first coach. We are the crisis coach. Because those unauthorized coaches are going to be giving you advice as it fits the agenda that they believe is there. We have the experience to understand what the agenda is actually going to be, and we want to protect you. So many of the unauthorized coaches or the informal coaches will say, well, we got to get out in front of this. We need to hold a press conference immediately. You need to say this, this, and this. If the media is knocking at your door, go answer it. And we're going to tell you something very different. And and your general response is going to follow a theme that I want you to remember no matter what happens tomorrow. I want you to go back to these themes and let us help you respond to the unplanned when it occurs. Now, if you really want to make 2017 a powerful year, let's work together, work with Ken Mercer. Let's establish a formal crisis management program and a structure far in advance that's going to help you evaluate threats and impacts. What does that mean? Well, we have many different organizations on this call today. Each of you have threats and risks that are unique to your organization. They're unique to your culture, to your students, to your families, to your community, to physically where your facility is located. So the first thing we want to do is sit down and make sure we understand on a broad level what are the general risks very specific to you. Then we want to create an open source intelligent network to help monitor any events that may be developing that might impact your unique situation. We want to establish and test a critical decision structure. When you're in the middle of a crisis, if you haven't reviewed what your approach, your key people, your teams, if you haven't delegated all of the parts and pieces to the response far in advance, you're going to be trying to make critical decisions under extreme duress and possibly, given the nature of the crisis, very little sleep. You may not have eaten, and those are the least optimum times to be making critical decisions. So we need to make sure that you've got those plans in advance. And then we want to make sure we develop appropriate crisis response strategies and crisis communications for known likely events so that we can leverage those when an unplanned event happens. So if we create message maps right now today, let's say you have social media channels, you have parent channels, a way you can communicate with parents, you have student channels, employee channels, you have a website, you have all these different communication tools. You have a way to push messaging out. And let's say there's a physical structure issue with your facility. For some reason, there's a portion of building that gives way and collapses. No one's hurt, but you need to communicate that out. Do you have message maps ready for that? Probably not. Why not? Let's go ahead and create some message maps for that. And even if it never ever happens, you can use those messages for a situation that does happen. So that if you need to quickly communicate to your entire community, to your fire department, to your police department, to the mayor, to the families, you have at least quickly pushed out some messaging and follow-up messaging that was prepared in advance. So you're saving everyone time and you're helping them not have to create extra stress by creating new messaging from scratch. Now, what happens when you're not prepared? Well, when you're not prepared, you accidentally do stupid things. And there are some pretty clear indicators of poor response. In addition to when you're not prepared, you may accidentally make a mistake, there are going to be people within your organization who it's going to take you a long time to convince you have got to be prepared because they are overconfident. They believe that any time you put a microphone in front of them, they can just talk on and they're going to be just fine. And they're not, no matter how professional a speaker you are. The reason a professional speaker is a professional speaker is because they practice. A poor response, someone who gives a poor response, also believes they are smarter than everyone else. And we all know how dangerous that can be. And they believe they can handle all exposures on the fly. You know, I'm reminded of the president of the railway in Canada that went to visit the site, you know, 4 or 5 days after one of his trains had, carrying highly hazardous materials, had exploded and basically burned down an entire town. And he had no prepared messaging. He was extremely overconfident and arrogant, and had no idea that not only would the entire media of North America mob him, but the entire town mobbed him. He was just overconfident and arrogant. Let's look at one example of something that happened recently in West Virginia. A woman named Pamela Ramsey Taylor posted something on Facebook that was highly offensive to everyone who saw it. I'm not even going to read it out loud. You can just see the post of it. This person is a contractor to not a Head Start program, but some sort of a program that worked with the county, received county funds. And interestingly, the problem was not so much this Facebook post as it was a response that someone made to it. The response was made by the mayor of Clay, West Virginia, who said, "Thanks, Pam, you just made my day." Immediately after, I have a sister who lives in West Virginia, and she sent this Facebook post to me immediately. She said, "Oh my God, have you seen this?" Within minutes after it had been posted. And I sort of watched as this evolved. And the mayor immediately came out with this sort of backhanded apology. She hadn't considered this. Nobody helped her write this. She said, "My comment was not intended to be racist at all." Now, I want you to understand, as soon as I read that, all I hear in my head is our CEO, Harry Rulin, saying, "When you're explaining, you're losing." When you're explaining, you're losing. Just please remember that. She said, "My comment was not intended to be racist at all. I was referring to my day being made for change in the White House. I'm truly sorry for any hard feelings this may have caused." Hard feelings. That's what she's sorry for. I mean, if you have a problem with what she said, well, she's sorry about that. Those who know me know that I'm not of any way racist. Well, I'm not even going to go there. Again, I would like to apologize for this getting out of hand. So what she's apologizing for is the fact that her immature response has gotten her in trouble. That's what this apology says. She is the former mayor. She was forced to resign. She resigned in a meeting the next night in a one-word, terribly misspelled notice. And the person who sort of started this all with the racist post about our First Lady is also a former employee. And she told the local news agency that she had been reprimanded at her job. At this point, she has been terminated. And that she's considering filing a lawsuit against those people who allegedly have slandered her. She added that the situation turned into a hate crime against her. So we have people who do not get the issue here at all, who are explaining, who are losing, and who were not prepared in any way, shape, or form to respond to a crisis situation. Now all of you need to sit there and think, is there anyone in my organization, in my school, on my campus, who might be at risk for this type of behavior? If so, we need to get a program in place, we need to educate them, and we need to make sure that everybody is talking and communicating from the same page. Because the additional characteristics of a poor response are there are no controls in place to keep this from happening in the first place. There are no support resources identified in advance. No one to go to and to talk about it and to help with it. Leadership lacks a network and is continually surprised by events. I guarantee the county was one of the last to know. The mayors, whoever the mayor reports into, whoever that board is of people, I guarantee they were all surprised by this, and I guarantee they didn't know how to respond. The board also then may interfere with the decision process and send mixed messages. And I think we all know that that can be a challenge. One of the things we're going to look at is how currently the entire board, or not the entire board, but a good part of the board is flipping over in Prince George's as they reel from abuse scandals that have happened there. And we're going to look at that because it really well illustrates there are no controls in place, there are no support resources, the leadership is lacking a network, and they're continually surprised by these terrible events that are happening to the kids, and that the board is confusing the messaging. As a matter of fact, one of the board members started a problem back in 2007. Here's what we're talking about when we say that everything is a surprise. I don't know if you remember this from September of this year. A Texas mattress company created a commercial that basically tried to cash in on the tragedy of 911. And it was an exceptionally poor taste. We've all seen commercials in poor taste, and these sort of homegrown mattress commercials, you know, we've all seen these, but never have I seen anything that sought to take a tragedy like 911 and sell mattresses. Well, the owner of the company sent a letter of apology, a public letter of apology, after this video was made. And you see the two people in the background of this woman. They are supposed to, oh, it's just awful. They're supposed to be representing the towers. And he says in his apology, what did we say that Harry Rulin always says? If you're explaining, you're losing. He says in his apology, today I was made aware of a social media video produced by our San Antonio team, highlighting a promotional sale, using the upcoming 911 anniversaries as the incentive. The video was posted on Facebook without my knowledge or approval from our corporate office in Houston. What are you all thinking right now? What I was thinking when I read that was, how come? How come you didn't know? Is it because you don't have any controls in place in order to assure that that doesn't happen? He goes on to say, I say this unequivocally with sincere regret. The video is tasteless and an affront to the men and women who lost their lives. We know that. All I can say is I'm deeply sorry, and on behalf of the entire family, I accept responsibility. I would have appreciated if he just said that up front, because he goes on to throw the team who created it way under the bus. He says, it's my fault, but it's not really my fault. I'm sorry, we're going to try to make sure it doesn't happen again, and the people who did it, we fired them. So everything's okay again, right? No. The entire letter will be in the brief when we finish the session and post the brief, and I really want you to look at that. I want you to sit down with your teams, and I want you to have this conversation with them. I want you to say, here's what happened, here's the video, and you can even do a YouTube search and actually see part of it. Say, watch this, here's the letter apologizing for it, and have your team analyze what's wrong with that letter. And it'll be a great place for you to observe your teams, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their thought process as they go about identifying the strengths and weaknesses of the response and how they would respond in turn. And one of the things you can talk to them about is something called the Y5, Y times 5. When a crisis unfolds, we need to balance the pressure to take immediate steps and respond, and the time needed to properly gather information so that you're making the correct response. Remember, when you're explaining, you're losing, but also everything you learn in the first hour of a crisis is probably going to be wrong. There's going to be rumor, there's going to be innuendo, there's going to be people think. Not everyone is going to see the full picture. No one's to blame for that. That's the way a crisis unfolds. You can't see from 5,000 feet every single thing that's going on in a geographic area, or especially in the ether, on the internet. So we want you to ask yourself 5 times, why? The initial reports and information in crisis are always going to be fluid, and there is a balancing act here that you have to take. Most of what you're going to learn in the first 24 hours, much less the first hour, is going to be wrong or incomplete. There is always a perceived pressure to communicate. Your board members, other people will say to you, we got to get out in front of this. The media's calling. Nobody said you have got to talk to the media. We've had time after time, we've had situations with schools and camps. We've had someone on the phone and we've said, okay, somebody's going to be knocking at your door any time now, and we've heard the knock. That doesn't, just because someone's there, because someone has dared to come onto your campus, your facilities, with a camera and a microphone, doesn't mean you have to talk to them. There's always that pressure to communicate, so wait. Take a moment, wait. When you're pressured to communicate, ask why. Why am I saying something now? Am I saying the right thing? Do I know all the facts? If by saying this, am I going to complicate the issue even further? Is there someone who should be communicating on this that's not me? Perhaps the police or the fire department or an official who is running an investigation. Upon receiving that answer to your question, okay, why am I communicating right now? Well, I don't really have to because I don't have all the information. I could wait a little bit more. And the next time you go to communicate, ask why. Through that why process, after, say, 5 times, if the answers are clear as to why you're communicating, the hospital has given us an absolute number of people that were injured in the bus accident. This we need to communicate. Why? Does the hospital need to communicate it? Will the police communicate it who are investigating the accident? Do we now know the facts and we should communicate internally to our staff and parents? If you know that, if that's clear, then move forward. But if not, hold until you can gather the facts and information you need to communicate clearly. When you do communicate, you're going to start with broad, not tactically specific first messages. You must let first responders or authorities or officials give the initial event details. Officials are going to discuss what happened, the past. You are going to discuss what's going to happen in the future, how we move forward from this. I've got a picture. We're back to that Prince George's idea again. I've got a picture there on the right for you. For years, Prince George's didn't strengthen school sex abuse policies. In 2007, a Board of Education member took a student to San Francisco for a conference. The parent had complained about this, but that complaint was not logged. One of the things we've talked to you about all this year is something called the Firestorm BRSA, or Behavioral Risk Threat Assessment Program, that you need to implement in your schools. One of the keystones of BRSA is a central repository for reporting, so that when instances happen, the data and the facts on those instances isn't housed in disparate places, so that no one can ever put all the pieces together to see the full picture. Pardon me. Flowers High School had 4 teachers convicted during this same period of time. They had 4 teachers convicted of inappropriate activities with students. The principal at the time blamed the female students, saying, well, they were coming onto the teachers and they were just looking for sugar daddies. That the principal made that statement, as per the Washington Post. More recently, they had a loss of $6.4 million in their Head Start grant money, and they recently are going through right now a situation where they had a non-teaching employee molest more than 35 students and videotape the activity. That is something that's completely out of control, with no control or oversight. Sit down with your teams and say, could this happen here? And then let's talk about the 3 C's of crisis response. We're going to talk about coordination, the crisis, and compliance. Let's look at the OSU campus attack and how people communicate. The 3 C's, coordination is always going to be first. It relates to life and safety, and it is primarily internal. So when a crisis occurs and it relates to life and safety, lockdown, shelter in place, what do we need to tell people? There's been an accident out in front of the school, and there's an electrical line blocking the road. How do we make sure that we don't have any kids that are going over to the local deli to get something to eat and maybe put in danger? How do we immediately get messages out? Okay, Ohio State University put out their Buckeye Alert. Their Buckeye Alert went to all of their social media channels. It went to every student's device, mobile device, and it is designed to override a PowerPoint presentation. So if a professor is standing in front of a class presenting via PowerPoint, the Buckeye Alert is designed to replace that PowerPoint screen. Currently, if I have my notifications turned off on my desktop, nothing else is going to appear while we are doing this presentation together right now today. If it was a Buckeye Alert, it wouldn't care. It would override that, and it would appear on my screen that there was an alert to shelter in place in the North Campus area. The next area, the second C, the crisis itself, that relates to brand and reputation. This is second, and it's generally external. Well, Ohio State followed that here. So first, they did a lot of internal communication, kept people safe. I have to say they were very fortunate. One of the labs where the actual event occurred, my husband laughed because he was a microbiology and physics student at Ohio State University, And the lab where there was reported to be a leak of some kind was the lab where he actually accidentally blew up some a methane experiment at one time. So it's not unusual that that specific area has issues because there are experiments going on in the chem labs there. So a police officer happened to be near the area when the event occurred, where the attacker used an automobile to drive into a crowd of people and then exited the vehicle with a butcher knife and started slashing. After that shelter in place, after the attacker was neutralized, the president made a strong message. Today we move forward, unified, secure, and Buckeye strong. He used the language of social media. He made a hashtag, Buckeye Strong. They created an image, Buckeye Strong. Everyone, I'm a Buckeye. I went to Ohio State University myself. Everyone, I know that is an alumnus, changed their Facebook image to Buckeye Strong, their Twitter to Buckeye Strong. So that message got carried out in a very smart way. Number 3, compliance can be delayed until all the facts are known. Now, I showed this image to Jim Satterfield. On the far right, you can see the president of the university. We have other officials. We have Mr. Kasich. We have people from the hospitals that responded, and Ohio State has a significant hospital and learning facility there on the campus. And it's a huge campus, I mean 16,000 square miles or something like that, all campuses combined. And I looked at, and I showed this to Jim, and Jim said we would be very upset with a client if we saw this. He said the client doesn't have to speak at this time. At this time, it should be officials only that are speaking. And so remember that the compliance conversations can be delayed until all of the facts are known. You'll see in these events where people believe they have to give a press conference every hour, every 2 hours, and each time they're on camera, there's no new information known, the situation is status quo. Is that really the best use of time of everyone holding these multiple press conferences? And that's something we'd like to work with you on and talk to you about. The key messages that Firestorm created for Virginia Tech were exceptionally effective. We want to give these to you so that if ever your school or your organization is in crisis, so at least you can go to these themes. Number 1, we will not be defined by this event. Buckeye Strong. We will invent the future. When Firestorm was on the campus of Virginia Tech, we put a lot of programs in place to reinvent, to create a new future for that school. And then, along with Virginia Tech, we embraced the families. We embraced the community, the people affected. It may not be families, it may be employees, it may be students, whatever that group of people may be. These key messages allowed Virginia Tech to not only meet its enrollment goals after the shooting, but actually to exceed them. We really want to talk about when you're communicating in a crisis as well. Remember we were talking about the poor response, someone who thinks one of the characteristics of a poor response or a poor communicator is that they think they're smarter than everyone else. You cannot manipulate the media to deliver the message that you think you want the media to carry for you. The media is going to carry the message that sells papers or sells website space or sells click-through ads. These are two different covers of the Wall Street Journal. You can see the 2 stars and the 4 stars in the upper right-hand corner showing first edition, later day editions. Same image, completely different headline. There's a reason for that. It wasn't to manipulate of the election or anything else. It was as more details were known, the story changed. But if you didn't really understand that, if you hadn't read the story, if you hadn't followed the story, you would see that these are completely different messages that are being delivered to people about the exact same issue. One talking about a softened tone, and one suddenly he's talking tough. If you really want to assure that this doesn't happen to you, speak directly to your stakeholders, not through the media. The most fabulous thing out there right now is this thing called the Internet, and in the Internet there are all these other pieces and parts, and one of those is non-traditional media and social media. You have more ways to communicate today directly to your audience than ever before. Donald Trump knows that. You know how to reach employees, customers, vendors directly. You don't have to go to the media today to get the real correct message out. But that means you have to start today. That means you need to sit down again with your team, buy them a pizza, and sit around a table and say, okay, how do we use our Twitter account? We don't have a Twitter account, maybe we should. How are we using our Facebook page? We don't have a Facebook page, maybe we should. How are we working with the Virginia Association of Independent Schools as an organization? Can other people help us get our message out when we need to? On social media, are we friends with our local police department? Are we connected to our mayor? Are we connected to our Chamber of Commerce? Are we connected to all these different local, geographically immediate other accounts so that when our message goes out, we have an agreed upon hashtag that we use that delivers that message to as broad an audience as possible? Bill Baker said when we started this conversation today that the hashtag for this session was Crisis Coach. That is the hashtag for all Firestorm webinar sessions, so that you only have to remember that one thing, Crisis Coach. If you do hashtag Crisis Coach, I will see it. If you say hashtag Crisis Coach, I don't know what to do, Karen, call us, I'm going to see it. Because that's our hashtag. We were the first ones to use it. Occasionally somebody else might try to use it, but we're the first ones to use it, and that's what we've been using for more than 4 years for all of our webinars. So you need to have that too. You need to have that with your community and your group. It may be the name of your school cares. Whatever the case may be, we look it up. If it's never been used before, that becomes your hashtag. And when you want to communicate, that's what you use. I'm going to show you how a hashtag quickly becomes a viral thing and the consequence management of that. Kellogg recently pulled ads from Breitbart amid hate speech concerns. They were feeling pressure, people lobbying them to pull their ads. Immediately upon doing so, Breitbart created the hashtag Dump Kellogg's. Sign the petition to boycott Kellogg's. Dump Kellogg's became a trend on Twitter for almost 24 hours, and Breitbart pushed it forward, saying breakfast brand blacklist Breitbart declares hate for more than 45 million readers. Boy, did that backfire. So you've got to think through the consequence management of your messaging, of why you're doing something. It can't be for a marketing purpose without bringing everyone else in the organization who may be impacted to the table. Because There's a little bit of piece of this pie of what you know. There's a little bit of a piece of pie of what you don't know, but there's this whole big segment out in the world of what you don't know. And one of the things Kellogg's didn't know was that they were going to suddenly generate a boycott against their own brand. When you are surprised, you are not in a position to make clear or optimal decisions, and you will make or issue poor communication. You've got to have communication prepared ahead of time. Continually focus on reducing the gaps in intelligence so that you can predict emerging threats. You know, that whole stupid clown thing that took the nation by storm over the past few months and culminated around Halloween. You know, I had so many schools that we work with writing me saying, we have these threats, what's going on? And, you know, I was surprised with some of them that they didn't realize this was a trend and this was something that had been moving across the country for a period of months. So you need to stay on top of what's going on. You need to confirm facts, control messages, identify consequences, and monitor open source intelligence. This is going to put you and your organization in the best possible position in a crisis. And you can call us at any time. We're going to talk to you for an hour, and we're not going to charge you for it because we want to help you. Remember, there are 5 common failures that are going to happen in an organization. We know this. The failure to control critical supply chains, the failure to train employees for both work and home, the failure to identify and monitor all threats and risks, the failure to conduct exercises and update your plans, and the failure to develop a crisis communication plan. In 2017, Firestorm wants you to move from whatever stage you are in now to the optimum stage, which is a culture of strategic performance in crisis, where you have a clear playbook, clearly defined roles, predefined events, information, and communication, a highly efficient and timely decision process, and a proven messaging and communication process to keep people and property safer, because your plans will be tested in 2017. We'd like this to be before the crisis, not in the crisis. And that will happen if you predict, plan, and perform. I want to thank you for your time today. You can download a copy of this brief again in about 48 hours on our website. It'll be 2006, the year in review. A copy of this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and we want to thank the Virginia Association of Independent Schools for a wonderful relationship through 2016, and we look forward to a continued terrific communications and educational relationship in 2017. Please contact us at webinars@firestorm.com or to our contact form at firestorm.com. Any questions you have, please forward them to us, and have a wonderful day. This will end today's session. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Karen. Goodbye.